Welcome to another episode of Remember the Great Sports, NBA 2K19 roster edits. Today we're going to explore and update the Indiana Pacers all-time team. This would include the ABA Indiana Pacers and the current day NBA Indiana Pacers. And this roster, I feel, on NBA 2K19 may be probably the one that is the weakest, if not the weakest, in looking at the history of this franchise. Meaning, I feel that there's a lot of people that are put on the Pacers that are good players, but they're not the true all-time greats of that roster. Most notably, everybody's aware of this, Reggie Miller is not on the game. They have not retained the rights to get Reggie Miller, so having an all-time Indiana Pacers team without Reggie Miller is like trying to play without, I don't know, a good example would be trying to play without Patrick Ewing on the Knicks or something like that. I mean, Patrick Ewing is a Knick, and if you don't have him on your all-time team, you're not paying attention too closely, that's for sure. So with that being said, there's going to be a lot of deletions on here. Some of these you may or may not agree with. Again, that's the nice thing about NBA 2K19. You can customize the roster to your liking. These are just simply my suggestions. I hope you still enjoy the video, and let's jump right in. So I'm going to make this kind of fast because we're going to cover a lot of ground on this video. These four guys all stay. The first guy to go is Victor Oladipo. Now, some people may hate me for doing this, but Oladipo has only been with the Pacers for a couple seasons. This is, I believe, his second season there. If Oladipo winds up playing another 3 or 4 years with the Pacers at the level that he plays at, there's no doubt about it, he would be on this all-time great team. But with the rich history of the Pacers, I think there are people that are more deserving than somebody that's only been there for 2 seasons at this point in their career. So Victor Oladipo is the first to go. Another one to go is Jalen Rose. This was a tough one. Jalen Rose is a really, really good player. Had some really good years with the Indiana Pacers. However, I just feel there's a couple players that are just a few notches above him. Secondly, if you look at a trend here, there are a lot of small forwards on this team. You got Paul George, you got Danny Granger, you got Chuck Person, and you got Jalen Rose. Okay, that's 4 small forwards that all play the same position. So, I would say if you like Jalen Rose over Chuck Person or Danny Granger, definitely you could delete Person or Granger instead of Jalen Rose. But I feel Jalen Rose has to go only because he's the lost man in the shuffle at the small forward position. Herb Williams stays. Clark Kellogg, we'll talk a little bit about him. Clark Kellogg was a very good player, again, for the Pacers. Had some very formidable seasons with them. But as you can see, by the 86-87 season, he was injured and no longer playing. But I feel there's some other power forwards on this list that are a little bit better than Clark was. Clark is a good player. If you prefer Clark Kellogg, you could definitely keep him instead of one of the other power forwards I'm going to suggest. Mark Jackson, very good player again. Just in the history of the point guards of the Pacers, there's actually 3 point guards that come to mind. 2 of them that I put on this list already. One would be an honorable mention. If I were to have a 16th player, he would be on this list, that I feel are better than Mark Jackson. So again, Mark Jackson's good. I just don't think he's better than the other 3 players that I'm going to share with you. Antonio Davis, same can be said about him. There's just no room for him on this roster. Yes, he played for a while with the Pacers, but he also played for the Raptors and a couple other teams. I just don't feel that he would be on this roster when I share these other guys with you. Detlef Schrempf, same category. This is now our 5th small forward on this stock roster. Detlef Schrempf is good, by all means. I just feel that he is the 5th small forward. I mean, you can't have a team of small forwards. Finally, David West. David West, again, a good player. I just feel there's other power forwards that play his position that played for the Pacers that are probably better than him. Finally, Lance Stephenson. Lance Stephenson had a couple good seasons with the Pacers. He had 2 stints with the Pacers, if I'm not mistaken. But there are definitely better shooting guards career-wise as Pacers that surpass Stephenson on this list as well. So, long story short, we're eliminating about half this roster. I feel that NBA 2K19 could have done a better job with this. Maybe NBA 2K20 will take some of my advice here, and they will make these changes to this roster. I, again, don't know what it takes to get the rights of a player and all that. So stay with me, and we'll show you the roster updates. All right, so welcome to the updated version of the Pacers. We're going to jump right into this, and you're going to see in the starting lineup, I have 3 created players. And that makes me go back to, how can you pass these 3 guys up? Now, this first guy, Freddie Lewis, okay, I can see where you maybe passed him up. Freddie Lewis was a very good player. He actually started out playing for the St. Louis Spirits, a now defunct ABA team. Once the Spirits basically abolished, he joined the Pacers and became their point guard for many years. Freddie Lewis was a very good defender. He was a very good assist guy. He would average about 12, 13 points a game, which is great for a point guard, especially on a team that's going to be loaded like this. I feel Freddie Lewis gets the nudge just slightly above the other point guard I'm going to share with you. There was another point guard that I left off this list that I feel was the 16th player on this list, and that could be somebody you could interchange out, with the reserves on this roster if that was your choice, if you wanted more guards on the team. So Freddie Lewis gets the nod as the starting point guard. No doubt about it, Reggie Miller. I mean, there's no discussion there. Everybody knows how great Reggie Miller was as an Indiana Pacer. I hope that someday NBA 2K can get the licensing figured out with Reggie so we can actually play as him on a roster. But you can't play without Reggie Miller on the all-time Pacers team. So Reggie Miller at shooting guard. That makes your small forward Paul George. Pretty simple there. Your starting power forward is George McGinnis. George McGinnis, a Hall of Famer. Started out his career with the 76ers. He's also on the all-time 76ers team. However, came to the Pacers and won championships with them. That's about the best I can describe. Also played for the Nuggets, it looks like, as well a little bit, but had some very formidable years as a Pacer. So George McGinnis, starting power forward. Starting center, and this is why you can see why Antonio Davis didn't make this list, is another Hall of Famer, and this is the starting center on the the Pacers when they won their ABA championships, and that is Mel Daniels. Mel Daniels was a very good rebounder, very good defender. He'd throw in 15 to 20 a game for you, but one of the all-time greatest Indiana Pacers, hands down, no questions asked. I feel he gets the nod above Rik Smits as your starter. Rik Smits is good, but he's not a Hall of Famer good like Mel Daniels. Spent many years with the organization, post-playing career, I want to say, in the front office or maybe as an announcer, I'm not sure. But he passed away a couple years ago, so Mr. Daniels is no longer with us, and that's why we're trying to bring his memory back with creating him on this roster. Jermaine O'Neal as your backup power forward, very good for many years for the Pacers. Played for a few teams, but as you can see, his best years probably were as a Pacer, averaging over 20 a game. almost 20 a game for 5 seasons, but for 4 seasons over 20 a game. Definitely a good power forward center type, again, above Antonio Daniels. Or Davis, excuse me, not Daniels. Now, we talked about small forwards, okay? We talked about Jalen Rose. We talked about Detlef Schrempf. A lot of people forget about this guy, and that's Roger Brown. Roger Brown was one of the best pure shooters that this team ever had. And not over Reggie Miller, don't think I'm saying that, but Roger Brown was a very formidable scoring small forward. I believe he's a little undersized. Yeah, he's 6'5", so he could play either shooting guard or small forward on this team. So if your preference would be to make him the shooting guard to back up Miller, you could certainly do that. I list him as a small forward, but he could play either position. Rik Smits, we kind of talked about him. He'd be a great backup center on this team. You know, very good player offensively, defensively. Had a great career with the Pacers. I want to say he played his entire career there, if I'm not mistaken. Had some nice long hair. Looks like they give him the nice 80s, 90s mullet there for his picture. So Rik Smits, definitely a good backup center. Now, here's the point guard I was discussing. This is Don Buse, or Buse, I believe is how it's pronounced. Not Bus, but Buse. And this could be argued as a better point guard than Freddie Lewis. So you could switch out Buse or Lewis as your starting point guard. And to give you a little idea about Donnie Buse, Donnie Buse played for a long time for the Pacers, and he was an exceptional defender. He was an exceptional passer. He was the guy that was not the scoring option. So I think over his career, maybe one time he averaged over double digits for a season. He was more of like an 8 points a game type of guy, but he'd have a boodle of assists, and he would also guard their best guard, meaning this would be the guy that you'd line up against Walt Frazier. This would be the guy that you put against Calvin Murphy. This would be all those all-time greats from back then in the 70s. This guy would try to shut down. Now, another amazing fact about him is telling you how good of a point guard he was. For his career, he averages like 1.2 turnovers a game or something crazy like that. For a point guard to only have like 1.2 turnovers a game, that is nuts. So that tells you how good at the fundamentals of the game this guy was. I would compare him to an early Jason Kidd that wasn't really, offensively a shooter, but offensively as a passer and defensively as a defender, he was awesome. So you could argue that Buse belongs in the starting lineup over Freddie Lewis. And that's why I kind of have their minutes split equally. Here's another small forward. Again, we have the small forward discussion. You have Danny Granger and you have Chuck Person. We'll get to Billy Knight in a second. You only have so many minutes for all your small forwards on a team. I feel with all these small forwards, they're all interchangeable, but one that you do need on there is Roger Brown. Going back to Billy Knight, the reason I don't list Brown as a shooting guard was because Billy Knight was their shooting guard. And he was, again, another formidable shooter, a really great shooter, good mid-range game. Probably didn't have a three-point line when he played. I'd have to double-check on that. But he would be your backup to Reggie Miller, and he would be great. One of the greatest Indiana Pacers ever to play the game. Now, your 13th guy on the roster is another power forward. And again, I said I'm going to have some power forwards on here that you may not know. And this is Bob Netolicky. Now, Bob Netolicky was on those teams with Mel Daniels, Don Buse, all of these ABA greats, and he was a very hard-working, rebounding, double-double type of guy. 10, 15 points a game, 10, 15 rebounds a game. I put him as the 13th man, so you have a little size on the bench if you need it. You, of course, could change that out for some of the other people that I'm going to show here. It's, again, just your preference on how you like to play your NBA 2K19 games. Because he can play either power forward or center. So he's your backup power forward, your backup power forward, or your backup center. And the same could be said about this man, Dale Davis. Dale Davis was actually a pretty similar player to Bob Netolicky. They were both kind of those elite defender types. They both could score about 10 points a game, pull you down about 10 boards, and both of them played power forward or center, whichever you preferred. So, I feel that either of these two are formidable solutions as your 13th man on the bench. And I round out the bottom with Mr. Herb Williams. Here we go again. We have another center. How many centers, can you have on a team? I feel that all three of these guys are interchangeable. If your preference is Herb Williams, as you can see, he played many years, for the Pacers, averaging, almost 20 a game a couple seasons and about 10 rebounds a game. So he, again, like Netolicky and Davis, can play either power forward or center on this team, and all three of these guys are interchangeable in my opinion. Now, with that being said, there is one honorable mention that I want to mention here, and that is Vern Fleming. Vern Fleming was kind of an oversized point guard. He was about 6'5" or 6", if I recall. But Vern Fleming played a long time for the Pacers, side by side with Reggie Miller. Vern Fleming, very, very good player. If your preference is to drop Dale Davis or Herb Williams for Vern Fleming, that would be completely understandable, because that would give you another shooting guard or another point guard off your bench, backing up Buse and Freddie Lewis, and that would also be a oversized. That would also be somebody that could play shooting guard as well. So with the Pacers, this is kind of, your reserve guys, your 13, 14, 15 guys are all kind of interchangeable, where I feel your starting five, with the exception of Freddie Lewis, are kind of like, why wouldn't you have those guys in your starting lineup? So this team is coached by legendary coach, going the wrong way, Bobby Leonard. Bobby Leonard was their coach during their championship years in the ABA. There have been other successful coaches of the Pacers, such as Larry Brown, to name one. Nate McMillan obviously is a formidable coach right now for the Pacers, but Bobby Leonard is the one that brought the Indiana Pacers their ABA championship. So Bobby Leonard, I feel, is the coach of this team. Hopefully you guys agree with most of my selections. Like I said, this is a little bit longer of a video because there's a lot of work to be done with this team. And again, hopefully NBA 2K kind of gets that, and they kind of take some of the advice, recommendations here to maybe secure the rights of some of these guys for maybe the updated version next year. So hopefully you agree with my selections. Look forward to your comments below. Thanks for watching, and have fun playing NBA 2K19.